Sydney is now home to one of the longest driverless metro lines in the world, with last year's extension of the M1 giving Sydneysiders a taste of their transport future. The metro has been heralded as perhaps the single most successful public transport project in Australian history, and many are eagerly awaiting the lines and stations the future will bring. At the same time, Sydney is getting its second airport and the new aerotropolis around it. Planners rightly decided it needed a rail connection. And here it is. Sydney Metro, Western Sydney Airport. Over a year late and over $2 billion over budget. All of this for a metro through a field. This is the story of Sydney's stupid metro.
Our story starts in 1986. The federal government of the day realised that Sydney Airport was nearly full. Following the same logic of many cities around the world, it was decided to build a second airport, crucially one with lots of space to expand in the future. They chose Badgerys Creek, a mainly farming area 60 kilometres southwest of Sydney, and got to work buying the land. In classic government fashion, however, immediately after they bought all the land, they decided just to build a third runway at Sydney Airport instead, which opened in 1994. But this just delayed the inevitable. In 2008, the project was restarted, and planning began properly in 2014. In 2016, the results of a scoping study were released, detailing multiple options for rail access to the airport. The options were an extension of the suburban network from either Leppington or St Mary's, or metro lines to either Rouse Hill, Liverpool, Parramatta or St Mary's. In 2018, it was decided to move forward with the St Mary's Metro option, with the Parramatta Metro in the longer term. Part of the rationale for choosing the St Mary's option was its potential to extend further north and south to Schofields and Campbelltown, opening new routes to the new airport and providing connections for existing suburbs like Marsden Park and Oran Park, and new centres like the Aerotropolis. In 2022, construction started, with a budget of $11 billion and a planned opening alongside the airport in 2026.
And that brings us to today. Whilst it is under construction, it's taking longer than expected. The builder wants a few more $1 billion and another year. There's also been an increasing amount of negative press, so I wanted to take a look at it myself and see what this project will bring and what problems it's had. We all love the metro, so it's hardly a surprise that if you ask your average person if they'd prefer a regular train line or a shiny new metro to the shiny new airport, they'd say,
a metro, of course.
But let's put our engineering caps on for a second. What's a metro actually for? Metro's to move a large number of people around in a relatively small area, but let's be real. This is neither an area with a large number of people or a place with close station density. This is not a place for a metro. And the patronage forecasts show that, even though the line has a maximum capacity of about 10,000 people per hour, the forecast amount of people per hour is not even 1,000 in each direction along the entire line. 1,000 people per hour. A regular train line could offer exactly the same amount of capacity, and it could conveniently connect straight to Parramatta and the city. And even the quad track of the main West Line conveniently ends at St Mary's anyway. You could just fly that onto a bridge and send it straight out here, just like you would a metro. I've spoken about this before so many times, but with modern up-to-date technology, a normal train line could be pretty much indistinguishable from a metro anyway, offering, at least on this section, incredibly high amounts of reliability. A regular train could also provide the same luggage space and extra facilities that they're using on the dedicated airport metro trains here. And regular trains could go at 160 kilometres an hour, a lot faster than the metro train's maximum of only 100. So if a regular train line seems to be the much better option, why did they choose to build a metro here?
In simple terms, politics. The Liberal government of the day had been embroiled in disputes with the rail, tram and bus union, and metros were seen as a symbol of passenger freedom from the evils of industrial bastardry. Let's not forget that metro staff are also heavily unionised. Instead of fixing the systemic issues at Sydney trains, it was much easier and cheaper to throw them in the too hard basket and just build a metro instead. But wait, there's more!
I'm standing now on the site of the future Outer Sydney Orbital, a planned future motorway, which will run from Richmond Road out there, down past the airport, and out that way to the M31 in southern Sydney. Now, for once, I don't have a problem with the motorway component. I have a problem with the freight rail component. You see, in the median of the motorway, they want to have a freight line from the main south line out south of Sydney through to Sefton to join the metropolitan goods lines. Now, the problem with that is that it's duplicating the metro that they've just spent $10 billion building. If it was delivered, you see, if the metro was delivered as a normal railway, possibly even a triple track line, the freight trains could run along that, and it would save going to all this expense to build a future freight railway. The line also isolates most of Western Sydney by only collecting to the heavy rail network at St Mary's. It isolates major hubs like Liverpool and Campbelltown, which will be forced to use local buses. And that's not to mention the huge amounts of urban sprawl down in the Southern Highlands. Instead, planners have decided that these local residents will be forced to put up with express buses to the airport using upgraded roads like this one. But there's one small problem. That was a massive lie.
It turns out these routes will be anything but express, making all stops on their routes. Take Route 845 from Campbelltown to the airport. It deviates through Narellan and Oran Park, taking a staggering 66 minutes end to end. Being generous to the bus, that'll still be twice as long as driving. Even an early morning train running all stops from Campbelltown to the existing airport is 10 minutes quicker. The daytime express trains, which run every 15 minutes, save another 10 minutes.
Did I mention? The express buses will only run once every half hour. Every half hour! Why even bother running a bus at that point?
Oh, but at least they'll be electric. Hopefully some of these issues will be addressed if the South West Rail Link ever gets extended.
The crux of the issue is that the line just isn't designed to be a public transport service, and we don't need to dig deep to validate that. If we read the cost-benefit analysis...
If you're a road engineer, say, who doesn't know what these are, they're these clever little accounting documents designed to conveniently overstate costs and understate benefits for public transport projects a government wants to kill off.
We see that the public transport benefits only account for 18%, and 64% of the benefits are for urban development. Planning controls are already in place for the development of land around Orchard Hills and Luddenham, and for the Western Parkland city centre. But investment in other infrastructure like hospitals and schools is lacking. Infrastructure Australia, in its pretty damning determination of the business case, said, and I quote, "There is a material risk that the Western Parkland city vision will not be realised. If this is the case, the metro will be the nation's largest white elephant, and by a pretty catastrophic margin." Infrastructure Australia also said things like, land use changes are about 3 times larger than what we would expect, and that the significant numbers of people the business case said would settle in this part of Sydney are likely to be overstated. They also said that by 2036, even 10 years after the line opens, the depressingly low patronage forecast will still mostly be made up of people going one stop from Orchard Hills to St Mary's. In other words, the line won't even be used by people going to the airport, let alone to Bradfield. Even with all these blatant lies to try and make the project seem more valuable, the business case clearly shows that the project only expects a 0.75% benefit cost ratio. For every dollar put in, the entire benefit, including the land use, better public transport, cleaner air, the lot of it, is only 75 cents. And once we factor in the cost blowouts, that drops to only 64 cents. Some argue the real benefit of the metro line was in its extendability, both north to Schofields and south here to Oran Park and in the future Campbelltown. And if that was really the case, then these sections should have been prioritised and done first. I think the residents here would much rather align directly to Campbelltown than to Bradfield and St Mary's. And in that case, we could have prioritised an extension of Metro West, say, from Westmead out to the airport. which would have again provided a direct connection to Parramatta and the CBD and been a lot faster.
It does seem like some of the mistakes of the past are being addressed though, with the most recent iteration of high-speed rail including a section from somewhere in the airport Bradfield region to both Parramatta and Sydney. This would, assuming it happens, kill any remaining prospect of a Metro West extension, but also would really hurt patronage on the Western Sydney Airport line, which would likely be relegated to a budget option, taking a staggering 50 minutes even just to reach Parramatta. The line isn't immune from the broader issues facing megaprojects around Australia and the wider English-speaking world either. Like pretty much all public transport in New South Wales, save for Sydney Trains and New South Wales Trainlink, this metro line will be privately operated under a so-called Public-Private Partnership, or P3 contract. It's also being built as a P3, like other metro and light rail lines. Basically, the government pays a private company a fixed amount in return for that company to run and maintain the trains and stations to standards set by the government. These P3 packages are very common around the English-speaking world, but are a potentially flawed way of delivering and operating public transport projects, as they can be more expensive in the long term. The big policy shift towards P3 projects was mostly led by the former coalition government, who also split up the former state government-owned bus and ferry operator, State Transit, and contracted its operations out to the private sector, which resulted in measurably worse outcomes for both passengers and staff. This links back into the mode choice. By splitting what could be one big government agency up into separate private companies for each line, the workforce is also divided, reducing bargaining power. We've already seen the impacts of this on the current M1 line operated by private company Metro Trains Sydney, which was involved in a months-long industrial dispute with its staff. When this happens at Sydney Trains, the sheer number of unionised workers can force better outcomes, sometimes, but this is much harder when a relatively small workforce is up against a massive global corporation, even if that workforce is unionised too. Another issue with this contracted, strictly regimented philosophy is the resulting technical incompatibility in lines. Loads of people have talked about this before, but mostly comparing the traction voltages and train widths of the M1 line to the other routes. That's a silly argument to make. The M1 benefited from reuse of existing infrastructure built for existing suburban trains, so it made sense to reuse a lot of suburban standards like train widths, car lengths, and traction voltages. Both Metro WSA and Metro West, which has a protected route next to WSA through the airport, are entirely new build projects, so they can benefit enormously from using highly optimized standards. As part of this, a much higher voltage is used, which makes electrical operations much more efficient and saves money. But I have a separate video about that. Trains are also slightly wider, and the cars are 4 meters longer, as long as a VSET or regional car. These maximise the floor space within the train. But even with the same physical standards, the two lines will be incompatible, which, assuming Metro West ever reaches the airport at all, will drive up cost of extensions. To extend Metro West to Bradfield, it'd have to use its own tunnels and its own station boxes, when, in all likelihood, a very underused existing line will be right there next to it. This is because the two lines will have different suppliers, different technologies, and different operators. As I discussed in my video on communications-based train control, the family of signalling systems used by the different Sydney Metro lines, I talked about how they are all proprietary and incompatible with each other. The trains, platform edge door equipment, and signalling systems used on WSA will all be supplied by Siemens, and the line operated by RATP Dev. We don't know who will supply this stuff for Metro West, but Siemens is competing with 4 other train builders for the contract, and RATP is competing as well.
I could finish here and make this a video about just the problems of this railway, but that feels a bit too superficial. So instead, I'd like to take a look at what we can do better in the future.
Most important in my mind is having a fair options assessment, setting up a truly independent advisory agency to develop costed and crucially binding plans could be one way of doing this. That ensures, barring corruption, as fair an assessment as possible. I've said this before, and it's a hill I'll die on, but Sydney Trains is not an inherently flawed system, and its reliability can easily be improved with targeted investment, like the ones I leaked earlier in the year. Even as a Sydney Trains route, the new Cumberland line from Bradfield to Epping via Parramatta would likely have reliability in the high 90%. Some progress has been made on this front though. New studies, particularly for the extension from Leppington to South Bradfield, wherever that is, explicitly claim to be mode agnostic, which is a good sign. I'm not going to sit here and pretend housing isn't an issue at the moment. Like most other young people, I'm genuinely really concerned for my future. But we need to deliver transport that's designed to actually transport people, not appease developers or prioritise city building in empty fields. Existing people living in existing places must be planned for first. We have massive transport black spots in Sydney, but we're throwing tens of billions of dollars at a metro through farmland. Bradfield is sprawl, and all sprawl is bad. Words like open new possibilities and 64% land use benefits should ring alarm bells for a project that's supposedly designed to connect an airport to an established city. It's good to see the government pushing transport-oriented development, but this needs to be way more aggressive and should have more involvement of Landcom to reduce concerns of corruption or developer appeasement. Planners also have to be realistic about what the future will bring and not safeguard crucial space for things that likely won't happen. Asking questions like, how likely is it that extensions will actually happen, and how much should we weight extendability over other factors like journey time and convenience, should be key to developing business cases. For example, future allowance was given to Metro West to run to the airport and Bradfield, but this has been all but scrapped from the planning board. But the new Cumberland line extension to Bradfield South hasn't. So why not change the plan to send the new Cumberland line along the path of Metro West to the airport? If this is to be a true city centre and a true major airport, we should have as many direct services as possible. Forcing people with luggage to change at South Bradfield is a recipe for disaster unless great care is taken to minimise hassle. Sydney Metro should aim to bring as much of the delivery and operation of projects in-house as possible. Some highly technical aspects like tunnel boring may be best suited to private sector contractors. However, things like track and civil, electrical and many other disciplines could be done in-house, like the structure of, or possibly even done by, Sydney Trains. This would save money long term, as the agency wouldn't have to pay the private sector to take risk in these aspects. The private consortium building Western Sydney Airport Metro has already asked for billions more to cover the increased risk of overruns, not the actual overruns themselves. Over time, more knowledge could be brought in-house, improving efficiency and allowing more projects to be delivered for less and faster. And Victoria's in-house level crossing removal project proves this, delivering more recent projects faster and cheaper. This could be integrated with the little remaining in-house knowledge Sydney Trains has, and could be repeated with operations. I don't see a reason why either a division of Sydney Trains or Sydney Metro couldn't operate metro lines. At the very least, a 50% joint venture could be established, returning to full public operation after a set number of years. Again, this would still be cheaper in the long run. Rolling stock is an exception, however. It's normally delivered as a maintenance P3, as it incentivises the manufacturer to build better trains, as they're responsible for making them available for service, and are penalised if they fail to do so, so that needn't change. Over time, Sydney Metro could sell this in-house knowledge as a consulting or operations branch. Successful operators do this to ensure they maintain in-house expertise during periods of low investment locally. This is demonstrated very clearly in the existing private contractors for Sydney Metro. Northwest is operated by Metro Trains Sydney, mostly a division of MTR, a government-owned transport operator in Hong Kong, and Western Sydney Airport will be operated by RATP Dev, the commercial branch of the French government-owned operator of the Paris Metro. Other examples are Keolis, majority owned by the French State Railway SNCF, and Network Rail Consulting from the UK.
I want to finish by telling you why I've made this video. I'm sure a lot of you will be asking why I've come out here to the middle of nowhere to make a video about a metro that, at the end of the day, is going to be built anyway. I'm not arguing that we should knock all this down and start again. For this project, the focus needs to shift to maximising the value that we can squeeze out of it. Fast-tracking additional supporting infrastructure like schools and hospitals, and really importantly, getting the housing built will be key to this railway's success. What I really want to do in this video is examine the problems in the Australian infrastructure sector, because I think this project really exacerbates them. And by analysing it, we can figure out how to overcome these problems in future projects. Thank you all for watching this video, and a special thanks to my channel members for their continued support. And even special thanks to Ted, who's let me borrow his drone today and has driven out with me to this bumhole part of Sydney.